This is Damon Fordham, a professor of African American history at Springfield College and Virginia College in Charleston. Here to talk to you a little bit about the great freedom fighter Frederick Douglass. Douglass was born a slave in the Baltimore, Maryland area around 1817. And as a young man, he was in the city and he was owned by Hugh and Sophia Auld. And as a young man, his mistress, Miss Sophia Auld, tried to teach him how to read. But the husband once told him that the only thing that a black person needed to do was to be a slave, and he overheard the master telling his wife that if he learned to read, he would not be fit to be a slave. And so he thought, hey, wait a minute. Reading could set me free? So he went around with the young boys of Baltimore who were white and were able to go to school, and he would get through gifts and trickery, tried to get them to teach him how to read, which was successful actually. And somewhere around this time period, he came across a book called The Columbian Orator. It was written by Mr. Caleb Bingham. And in it, he found a story called The Dialogue Between the Master and the Slave, in which the slave actually outwitted the master through dialogue. The master was trying to beat the slave, and he said, wait a minute now. You know, this is a really unjust thing that you're doing, essentially. And so he said, well, don't I feed you and take care of you? He says, yes, but the same way that you would do your own horses or cows. And to make a long story short, the master agreed to free the slave due to this debate that they had, in which the slave convinced the master that slavery was an evil and unjust thing to do because it was something that he wouldn't want for, the master wouldn't want for himself. And so Frederick read that and said, this is how perhaps through the use of words and language and literacy that I could perhaps be free. So he forwarded the pass so he could take a train to New York, and he eventually went on to England, where he became a speaker against slavery. And a short time afterward, the people in the anti-slavery movement managed to buy off his freedom from his former master, and he went around the United States at great risk, speaking out against slavery, so much so that he was one of the main people who negotiated the freedom of his people with Abraham Lincoln. And so Douglass wrote about his adventures in this book called The Life and Times of Frederick Douglass. And it's very inspiring even to this day for young people to understand the importance of reading and education, and that the greatest weapon that you could ever have is in your head and not in your hands. This is Damon Fordham about the life and times of the great freedom fighter Frederick Douglass. Thank you.